3 men died after proposing to her. When the Duke returned after 9 years and learned the truth, he did not run. He walked straight through a storm to find her, and she could tell that history might repeat itself. Isabelle Ashford stood at the entrance of Lady Pembroke's grand ballroom, her hand trembling slightly on Aunt Margaret's arm. She had not attended a social gathering in 2 years, and the moment she stepped through those doors, she remembered exactly why. Every head in the room turned toward her. Fans snapped open, conversations stopped mid-sentence. And then the whispers began, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. "That is Miss Ashford, the cursed one. 3 dead fiancés. I cannot believe she dares show her face." Isabelle kept her chin high and her expression carefully neutral as Aunt Margaret guided her into the ballroom. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk, her dark hair arranged in an elegant style that had taken her maid nearly an hour to perfect. She knew she looked well, but she also knew that no amount of beauty could erase the stigma that clung to her like a shadow. Lady Margaret Sutherland, her father's sister and her only true ally in the world, squeezed her arm gently. "You are doing wonderfully, dear. Just breathe." They found a spot near the tall windows overlooking the garden, far enough from the center of the room to avoid immediate confrontation, but not so far as to appear they were hiding. Isabelle accepted a glass of champagne from a passing footman and tried to ignore the way people were staring at her. "I should not have come," Isabelle murmured. "Nonsense," Aunt Margaret replied firmly. "You have every right to be here. Lady Pembroke is my dear friend, and she specifically invited you. Hold your head high, my darling. You have done nothing wrong." But the whispers continued, and Isabelle could feel them like physical blows. Lord Pemberton died of heart failure 2 weeks before their wedding. She was only 18. Mr. Langley drowned in the Thames a month after proposing to her. And Viscount Harrington, his horse, threw him, broke his neck. That was 4 years ago. They say anyone who proposes to her dies. It is a curse, surely. Isabelle's fingers tightened around her champagne glass. 4 years. It had been 4 years since Viscount Harrington's death. 4 years since she had withdrawn from society entirely. 4 years of living in her aunt's London townhouse like a ghost. Her own family had all but disowned her. Her parents in Hertfordshire barely acknowledged her existence, embarrassed by their cursed daughter. Her brother Thomas made it clear at every opportunity that she was a stain on the family name. Only Aunt Margaret had stood by her, insisting that the deaths were tragic coincidences and nothing more. But as Isabelle stood in that ballroom, feeling the weight of hundreds of judgmental eyes, she could not help but wonder, what if they were right? What if she truly was cursed? "Miss Ashford?" The voice came from behind her, and Isabelle turned to find 3 young ladies approaching. She recognized them immediately: Miss Penelope Hartwick, Miss Clarissa Morton, and Lady Caroline Winters, all daughters of prominent families. "Miss Hartwick," Isabelle replied with a polite nod. "Miss Morton, Lady Caroline, how unexpected to see you here," Miss Hartwick said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I was not aware you still attended social events." "Lady Pembroke was kind enough to extend an invitation," Isabelle said carefully. "How charitable of her," Miss Morton added, exchanging glances with her companions. "Though I do wonder if the other guests were made aware of your attendance. Some might have preferred notice." Aunt Margaret stiffened beside Isabelle. "I beg your pardon?" "Oh, we mean no offense, Lady Sutherland," Lady Caroline said sweetly. "We are simply concerned for the gentlemen present, given Miss Ashford's unfortunate history." The implication was clear, and Isabelle felt heat rise to her cheeks. Before she could formulate a response, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted dramatically. A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. Conversations stopped. Heads turned toward the entrance. "Is that the Duke of Thornfield? He has returned from abroad. 9 years he has been gone. Good heavens! Look at him." Isabelle's heart stopped. She turned slowly, hardly daring to breathe. Sebastian Thornfield stood in the entrance to the ballroom, and the sight of him stole the air from her lungs. He had always been handsome, even as a boy, but the man who stood before the assembled crowd was devastating. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore black evening clothes that had clearly been tailored by a master. His dark hair was swept back from a face that had lost all traces of youth, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those grey eyes that had once looked at her with such warmth. Sebastian Thornfield was not merely a duke. He was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in England, having inherited the dukedom at the age of 19 when his father died unexpectedly. His estate spanned 3 counties, and his influence reached into the highest circles of government and society. Women called him heartless, men called him formidable. Everyone agreed he was the most sought-after bachelor in the realm, precisely because he seemed utterly unattainable. Those grey eyes were now looking directly at her. Isabelle felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath her. Sebastian Thornfield, her childhood best friend. The boy she had spent endless summer days with, climbing trees and reading poetry and arguing about philosophy. The boy who had vanished from her life without a word of explanation 9 years ago when she had become engaged to Lord Pemberton, and now he was back. The Duke of Thornfield, Aunt Margaret breathed beside her. "My goodness, how he has changed." Sebastian began walking across the ballroom, and the crowd parted before him like the Red Sea. Ladies curtsied as he passed. Gentlemen bowed their heads. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. He was walking toward her. Isabelle wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but her feet were frozen to the floor. He stopped directly in front of her and bowed. "Miss Ashford." His voice was deeper than she remembered, with a slight rasp that sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "Your Grace," she managed, dropping into a curtsy. The formality felt strange, wrong. Once she had called him Sebastian. He turned to her aunt. "Lady Sutherland, it is a pleasure to see you again." "Your Grace. Welcome home," Aunt Margaret replied warmly. "We had heard you were travelling on the continent." "I have been in Italy and France," Sebastian confirmed, "but I found myself longing for England." His gaze returned to Isabelle, and for old friends. There was something in the way he looked at her that made Isabelle's breath catch. Not pity, which she had expected, not fear, which she had grown accustomed to. Something else entirely. "It has been a long time, Your Grace," Isabelle said carefully. "Far too long," he replied. "I wonder if I might—" "Your Grace." Lady Pembroke herself appeared, her face flushed with excitement. "How wonderful that you could attend! Come, you simply must meet Lord Harrington. He has been asking after you." Sebastian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Lady Pembroke." He turned back to Isabelle and bowed. "If you will excuse me, Miss Ashford, Lady Sutherland." He allowed himself to be led away, but not before glancing back at her once. The moment he was gone, Miss Hartwick let out a dramatic sigh. "The Duke is even more handsome than before. Such a shame he wasted 9 years abroad when he could have been here, married to a suitable lady." "Perhaps he will remedy that now," Miss Morton suggested. "I hear his mother, the Dowager Duchess, has been quite eager for him to settle down." "Indeed," Lady Caroline said. "I imagine she has someone in mind already, someone appropriate." The emphasis on the word appropriate was not lost on Isabelle. She felt Aunt Margaret's hand on her arm, squeezing gently in support. "If you will excuse us, ladies," Aunt Margaret said coolly, "I believe I see Lady Pembroke signalling for us." She guided Isabelle away from the group, toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. "Do not let them upset you, dear," Aunt Margaret said. "They are simply jealous." "Jealous of what?" Isabelle asked bitterly. "My 3 dead fiancés?" "Jealous that the Duke of Thornfield sought you out the moment he entered this ballroom," her aunt replied. "Did you see the way he looked at you, Isabelle? He was merely being polite. We were friends once, that is all." "Friends who have not spoken in 9 years," Aunt Margaret pointed out. "And yet the first thing he does upon returning to England is approach you. That is not mere politeness, my dear." Before Isabelle could respond, she felt eyes on her again. She glanced across the ballroom and found Sebastian standing with a group of gentlemen, but his gaze was fixed on her. When their eyes met, he did not look away. Isabelle's heart raced. What was he doing? Did he not understand how dangerous it was to show her any attention? Did he not know what people would say? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Isabelle remained at Aunt Margaret's side, enduring more whispers and sideways glances. Several times, she caught Sebastian watching her from across the room, but he did not approach her again. It was nearly midnight when Aunt Margaret finally suggested they depart. Isabelle was more than ready to leave, exhausted from hours of pretending she could not hear the cruel comments being made about her. They made their way toward the exit, Isabelle eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the ballroom. As they waited in the entrance hall for their carriage to be brought around, Isabelle caught one last glimpse of Sebastian across the room, deep in conversation with several gentlemen. He did not look her way. Their carriage arrived, and they climbed inside. "What a remarkable evening," Lady Margaret exclaimed the moment they were settled. "The Duke of Thornfield has such a commanding presence, and he is very handsome." Isabelle stared out the window at the passing streets. "I suppose." "You suppose?" "My dear, every unmarried woman in that ballroom was positively swooning. And some of the married ones too, I dare say. How fortunate for him." Her aunt studied her with knowing eyes. "You knew him, did you not?" Isabelle's fingers twisted in her lap. "A long time ago." "How long?" "We were children." "And?" "And nothing, Aunt. It was a lifetime ago." Lady Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, gently, "He asked permission to call on you." Isabelle's head snapped toward her aunt. "What?" "Just before we left, he approached me quite properly and requested permission to call on you tomorrow afternoon." Her aunt's expression was carefully neutral. "I told him he was welcome." "Aunt Margaret, I know you are frightened, my darling. I know what you have endured, but you cannot hide forever." Lady Margaret reached over and took Isabelle's hand. "You are 29 years old, and you have so much life left to live, so much love to give. It would break my heart to see you waste it because of cruel gossip and cruel fate." "I am not interested in love," Isabelle said firmly. "Perhaps not, but perhaps you are interested in friendship, in companionship, in simply being seen as more than the curse they have made you out to be." Isabelle looked away, her throat tight. "He left me without a word." "Then perhaps it is time you ask him why." The carriage fell silent. Outside, London passed by in shadows and lamplight. Isabelle's mind churned with memories she had tried so hard to bury. Sebastian as a boy, laughing as they raced through the gardens. Sebastian teaching her to skip stones across the lake. Sebastian listening patiently as she confided her fears about her cold, distant parents. And then, nothing. Silence. Absence. She had been 18, newly engaged to Lord Pemberton, and Sebastian had simply vanished. No letter, no explanation, just gone. It had hurt more than she cared to admit. More than losing her fiancés, if she were honest with herself. Because those men had been strangers, chosen by others. But Sebastian had been hers, her friend, her person, and he had left her. "I do not know if I can face him," Isabelle whispered. Her aunt squeezed her hand. "You are the strongest person I know, Isabelle Ashford. Whatever you decide, I will support you. But do not let fear make your decisions for you." Isabelle nodded, though doubt still gnawed at her heart. When they arrived home, she went straight to her room, pleading exhaustion. But sleep would not come. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Wondering if she had the courage to face the man who had once meant everything to her. Wondering if, after 9 years, there was anything left between them worth salvaging. The next afternoon, Isabelle sat in the drawing room of Aunt Margaret's townhouse, her nerves stretched taut as piano wire. She had changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple gown of pale blue muslin, then immediately regretted the choice. What did it matter what she wore? This was not a courtship. This was merely a visit from an old acquaintance. "Stop fidgeting, dear," Aunt Margaret said from her position by the window, where she had been stationed for the past 20 minutes, watching the street. "You will wear a hole in your gloves." Isabelle looked down to find she had indeed been twisting the fabric between her fingers. She forced her hands to still, folding them primly in her lap. "Perhaps he will not come," she said. "He will come," Aunt Margaret replied with certainty. "The Duke of Thornfield is many things, but unreliable is not one of them." As if summoned by her words, the butler appeared in the doorway. "Your Grace, the Duke of Thornfield." Isabelle's heart leapt, despite her efforts to remain calm. Sebastian entered the drawing room, and once again she was struck by how much he had changed. In the daylight streaming through the windows, he seemed even more imposing than he had at the ball. He wore a dark grey coat that emphasized his broad shoulders, buff-colored breeches, and boots polished to a mirror shine. His dark hair was neatly arranged, his cravat tied with mathematical precision. "Lady Sutherland," he said, bowing to her aunt. "Miss Ashford." "Your Grace," Aunt Margaret replied warmly. "How kind of you to call. Please, do sit down." Sebastian chose a chair across from Isabelle, maintaining a perfectly respectable distance. The butler served tea, and for a long moment the only sound was the gentle clink of china. "I trust you are well, Miss Ashford?" Sebastian asked, his tone polite but distant. "Quite well, thank you, Your Grace," Isabelle replied, matching his formality. "And you? I hope you recovered from the journey back to England without difficulty." "Indeed. The crossing was smooth, thankfully." Another silence fell, stilted and awkward. Isabelle searched for something to say, anything to fill the uncomfortable quiet. "I understand you spent time in Italy?" she ventured. "Yes, primarily in Rome and Florence. The architecture is quite remarkable. I have read about the museums there. They must be extraordinary." "They are. The art collections alone could occupy one for months." Aunt Margaret cleared her throat delicately. "Your Grace, I wonder if you might enjoy seeing the garden. We have recently installed a new fountain, and the roses are in full bloom." "Isabelle, why do you not show the Duke? I shall remain here with my correspondence." It was a transparent ploy to give them privacy, and they all knew it. But Sebastian rose smoothly. "I would be delighted to see the garden, if Miss Ashford would be so kind." Isabelle had no choice but to agree. She led him through the French doors onto the terrace and down into the garden, acutely aware of his presence beside her. They walked in silence for a moment, following the gravel path between beds of roses and lavender. The garden was not large, but Aunt Margaret had cultivated it with care. Late summer flowers bloomed in abundance, their scent heavy in the warm afternoon air. "It is a lovely garden," Sebastian said, his hands clasped behind his back. "Your aunt has excellent taste." "She spends a great deal of time here," Isabelle replied. "She finds it peaceful." "I can understand why." They reached the fountain, a modest affair with a stone cherub pouring water from an urn. Isabelle stopped beside it, trailing her fingers through the cool water. "How long do you intend to remain in London?" she asked, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "For the foreseeable future. I have business matters that require my attention. The estates have been managed by stewards in my absence, but there are decisions that require my personal involvement." "Of course. 9 years is quite a long time to be away." "It is." He paused. "I understand you have been residing with Lady Sutherland for some time now?" "Yes, for the past 4 years." She did not elaborate, and he did not press. "And your parents? They remain in Hertfordshire?" "They do. My brother Thomas manages the estate now." The conversation was excruciatingly polite, excruciatingly safe. They were dancing around everything that mattered, speaking in careful platitudes that revealed nothing. Sebastian moved to examine a rosebush, his expression thoughtful. "I recall you were always fond of gardens. You used to spend hours in the one at Thornfield Manor when we were children." Despite herself, Isabelle felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I remember. Your mother's gardener was very patient with me, teaching me the names of all the plants. Old Morrison. He passed away 5 years ago. I am sorry to hear that. He was a kind man." He was. Another silence fell, but this one was slightly less uncomfortable. The mention of their shared childhood had created a small crack in the formality between them. "Do you still enjoy reading?" Sebastian asked. "You were always buried in some book or another." "I do, though I find I have less time for it than I once did." "What are you reading currently?" "A collection of essays by Mr. Carlyle. Aunt Margaret lent it to me." "And you? Do you still read as voraciously as you once did?" "When time permits. I developed a fondness for Italian literature while abroad. Dante, primarily. The Inferno, among others. Though I confess I found Purgatorio more compelling." They continued walking, their conversation turning to books, to the theatre, to London society. Safe topics, careful topics. Nothing that touched on why he had left, nothing that acknowledged the curse that hung over her like a shadow, nothing that delved beneath the surface of polite acquaintance. And yet, beneath the formality, Isabelle could feel something stirring, a familiarity, a comfort that came from years of shared history, even if that history now lay buried under 9 years of silence. As they completed their circuit of the garden and began walking back toward the terrace, the conversation had eased somewhat, not warm, precisely, but less strained than when they had begun. They returned to the drawing room, where Aunt Margaret was making a very poor pretense of reading correspondence. She looked up with barely concealed interest as they entered. "Did you enjoy the garden, Your Grace?" "Very much, Lady Sutherland. You have created a sanctuary in the midst of London." "How kind of you to say." Aunt Margaret's eyes twinkled. "Will you stay for more tea?" "I am afraid I must decline. I have an appointment this afternoon that I cannot miss." Sebastian bowed to them both. "Lady Sutherland, Miss Ashford, thank you for receiving me." "You are welcome any time, Your Grace," Aunt Margaret assured him. After he departed, Aunt Margaret set down her correspondence with obvious excitement. "Well, how did it go?" Isabelle sank onto the sofa, feeling oddly drained. "It was formal, very formal. We spoke of books and Italy and gardens, nothing of consequence. But he came. That is something, I suppose." Aunt Margaret studied her niece thoughtfully. "Give it time, my dear. These things cannot be rushed." 3 days later, a package arrived at Aunt Margaret's townhouse. The butler brought it to Isabelle on a silver tray, and she stared at it with confusion. "For you, miss," from the Duke of Thornfield. Isabelle's hands trembled slightly as she unwrapped the brown paper. Inside was a leather-bound volume, a collection of Dante's works in the original Italian, with English translations on facing pages. The binding was exquisite, the pages edged in gold. A note was tucked inside the front cover. Isabelle unfolded it with careful fingers. "Miss Ashford, I recalled our conversation about Italian literature and thought you might enjoy this edition of Dante. The translation is quite good, though nothing compares to reading him in the original. I hope you are well. S. Thornfield." Isabelle read the note 3 times, searching for hidden meaning in the brief, formal words. But there was none. It was simply thoughtful. A gesture from someone who remembered what she enjoyed, who wanted to share something he found meaningful. "What is it, dear?" Aunt Margaret asked, coming into the room. "A book. From the Duke. Dante's works." Aunt Margaret's face lit up. "How lovely, and how thoughtful of him to remember your interest in literature." "It is just a book," Isabelle said, but she held it carefully, as though it were something precious. "It is never just a book, my darling. It is a connection, an acknowledgement." Isabelle set the volume on her bedside table that night and found herself reading it before sleep. The poetry was beautiful, haunting, and every time she turned a page, she thought of Sebastian selecting this particular edition, writing that brief note, sending it to her. But he did not call again. The days passed 1 week, then another, and there was no further contact. Isabelle told herself she was not disappointed. They had renewed their acquaintance. That was all. There was nothing more to expect. 2 weeks after Sebastian's visit, Isabelle found herself once again preparing for a ball. Lady Worthington was hosting, and Aunt Margaret had insisted they attend. You cannot hide away just because the Duke has been occupied with his affairs, her aunt had said firmly. Besides, Lady Worthington's balls are always well attended. It will do you good to be seen. So Isabelle wore the ivory gown Aunt Margaret had commissioned, a beautiful creation of silk and lace that made her feel both elegant and exposed, and allowed herself to be taken to the ball. When they entered Lady Worthington's ballroom, the now familiar whispers began. Heads turned, fans opened, but Isabelle kept her chin high and her expression neutral. She had weathered worse than curious stares. Aunt Margaret guided her to a relatively quiet corner, and Isabelle accepted a glass of champagne, preparing herself for an evening of polite smiles and careful distance. And then she saw him. Sebastian stood near the far wall, deep in conversation with several gentlemen. He wore black evening clothes that made him look even more imposing than usual, his dark hair perfectly arranged, his expression one of polite attention to whatever the Earl of Blackwood was saying. As though sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and something flickered in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. Relief. He excused himself from his companions and began walking toward her. The crowd parted naturally before him, and Isabelle felt her heart begin to race despite her efforts to remain calm. He stopped before her and bowed. "Miss Ashford. Lady Sutherland." "Your Grace," Isabelle replied, dropping into a curtsy. "I hope you are both well this evening." "Quite well, thank you," Aunt Margaret said warmly. "And you, Your Grace? We have not seen you these past 2 weeks." "I have been occupied with estate business. My apologies for not calling again." His gaze shifted to Isabelle. "I trust you received the volume I sent." "I did. Thank you. It was very thoughtful. Have you had the opportunity to read any of it?" "I have. The Purgatorio, primarily." "You were right. It is compelling." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I am pleased you are enjoying it." They stood in silence for a moment, the formality between them palpable. Then Sebastian cleared his throat. "Miss Ashford, I wonder if you might grant me the honor of a dance." Isabelle hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. "I would be pleased to, Your Grace." He led her onto the dance floor as the musicians began a waltz. His hand settled at her waist, hers rested on his shoulder, and they began to move in perfect synchronization. For the first few moments, they maintained the careful formality that had characterized all their interactions since his return. Proper distance, proper form, proper silence. Then Sebastian spoke, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Lady Pemberton's feathers are even more extravagant than usual this evening. I believe she has added peacock plumes to her already impressive collection." The comment was so unexpected, so reminiscent of their childhood observations, that Isabelle nearly missed a step. She looked up at him, saw the faint amusement in his grey eyes, and felt something loosen in her chest. "You should not say such things," she whispered, but there was no reproach in her voice. "Why not? It is merely an observation. And look, Lord Hartwick's waistcoat. Is that meant to be a pattern, or did he lose a wager?" Isabelle glanced over and had to press her lips together to suppress a smile. Lord Hartwick's waistcoat was indeed a garish combination of yellow and orange stripes that clashed violently with his crimson coat. "Sebastian," she said, and only after his name left her lips did she realize she had abandoned the formality of his title. If he noticed, he gave no indication. Instead, he continued their old game. "And Miss Morton. That shade of green does not suit her complexion at all. She looks rather like she might be ill." This time Isabelle did laugh, a soft, genuine sound that she quickly tried to smother. But the damage was done. The careful walls between them had cracked. "You are terrible," she said. But there was warmth in her voice now, a hint of the easy affection they had once shared. "I am honest. There is a difference." They continued to dance, falling naturally into the patterns of their childhood. The commentary, the shared observations, the way they had always found humor in the pomposity and absurdity of society. "Do you remember," Sebastian said, his voice quieter now, "that garden party at the Ashcroft estate? You spent the entire afternoon critiquing everyone's hats. I did no such thing." "You absolutely did. You said Mrs. Pemberton looked like she was carrying a bird's nest on her head." Despite herself, Isabelle smiled at the memory. "It was a truly terrible hat." "It was. But you were the only one brave enough to say so. Even if you only said it to me." The mention of their shared confidences, the way they had once told each other everything, created a bittersweet ache in Isabelle's chest. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember what it had been like having someone who understood her, who made her laugh, who saw her as more than just a title or an expectation. The music ended, but they remained standing there, hands still joined, neither quite willing to break the connection. "Thank you for the dance," Sebastian said finally. "It was my pleasure." As he prepared to lead her back to Aunt Margaret, he leaned slightly closer and said quietly, "There is an exhibition at the British Museum, new acquisitions from Greece. I thought you might find it interesting. Would you permit me to escort you? 2 days hence, if that suits you?" The invitation was casual, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Isabelle should refuse, should maintain distance, should protect him from association with her. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine interest there, she found herself unable to say no. "I would like that very much," she said. "Thank you. Excellent. I shall call for you at 2 o'clock. With a proper chaperone, of course." "Of course." He bowed and escorted her back to Aunt Margaret, who was trying very hard to appear as though she had not been watching their entire interaction. "Thank you again, Miss Ashford," Sebastian said. "Lady Sutherland, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." He departed, and Isabelle stood there, her heart still racing from the dance, from the ease with which they had fallen back into their old patterns. "You were laughing," Aunt Margaret observed quietly. "I have not seen you laugh like that in years." Isabelle wanted to deny it, to insist it meant nothing, but she could not, because for those few minutes on the dance floor, she had forgotten about the curse, forgotten about the whispers, forgotten about everything except the simple joy of being with someone who knew her, truly knew her, and that both thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. 2 days later, Sebastian's carriage arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. Isabelle had dressed with care in a walking dress of deep rose, and her maid Mary sat in the corner of the carriage as they made their way to the British Museum. The earlier tension between Isabelle and Sebastian seemed to have dissolved after their dance. They spoke easily about the exhibition they were about to see, about recent books they had read, about nothing and everything at once. When they arrived at the museum, Sebastian handed her down with careful propriety. Inside, the vast marble halls echoed with their footsteps as they made their way to the Greek Antiquities Gallery. As they entered, Isabelle noticed several people turned to stare. A few whispers started, but Sebastian seemed entirely oblivious to them, guiding her toward a magnificent marble frieze with genuine enthusiasm. "This was only recently acquired," he said, gesturing to the sculpture. "From a temple in Athens. The craftsmanship is extraordinary." Isabelle studied the intricate carvings, momentarily forgetting the curious onlookers. "It is beautiful. The detail in the drapery alone must have taken months." "Years, most likely." Sebastian moved closer to point out a particular feature. "See here, the way the sculptor captured movement in stone. It is remarkable." They wandered through the gallery, their conversation flowing naturally now. The formality that had marked their earlier interactions had vanished entirely. They reminisced about childhood adventures, laughed at shared memories, debated the merits of various artistic periods. Do you remember, Isabelle said, pausing before a display of pottery, when you were convinced you had discovered a Roman coin in your father's garden? Sebastian's lips quirked. I was 12 and had just finished reading Gibbon. I was certain I would become a famous archaeologist. You were so disappointed when the antiquarian identified it as a button from your father's coat. I was devastated. Though I recovered quickly enough and moved on to astronomy the following week. You were going to discover a new planet. I was ambitious. He looked at her with warmth in his eyes. You never once told me I was being foolish. Because you were not foolish. You were curious. You made everything seem possible. They continued through the exhibition, completely at ease with each other now. At one point, Isabelle made an observation about a particular sculpture's historical context, and Sebastian listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions. The conversation flowed as it had when they were children, natural, engaging, free of pretense. Mary followed at a discreet distance, her presence ensuring propriety while giving them enough space to speak privately. They spent nearly 2 hours viewing the exhibits before Sebastian suggested they return. I have taken up enough of your afternoon, and I fear Mary must be exhausted from all this walking. In the carriage, as Mary dozed in the corner, Sebastian and Isabelle continued their conversation, discussing the artifacts they had seen. The ease between them felt precious, fragile, something Isabelle wanted to protect. They had traveled perhaps 3 blocks when their carriage slowed in the congested street. Through the window, Isabelle could see a woman struggling with a basket on the pavement. As she watched, the basket tipped, and oranges began rolling everywhere into the street, under carriage wheels, scattering across the cobblestones. "Oh dear," Isabelle said, her instinct to help overriding caution. Before Sebastian could stop her, she had opened the carriage door and stepped down onto the street. She gathered her skirts to avoid the mud and began helping the woman collect the scattered fruit. Sebastian followed, and together they quickly retrieved the oranges. "Thank you so much," the woman said gratefully. "You are very kind." A young boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, stood beside her, watching with wide eyes. Isabelle smiled at him and reached out to brush a strand of hair from his forehead in an affectionate gesture. The woman's expression changed instantly. She seized her son's arm and yanked him back violently. "Do not touch him!" she shrieked. "Keep your cursed hands off my child!" Isabelle stumbled backward, shocked. "You have the devil's mark on you," the woman continued, her voice rising. 3 dead men. Everyone knows what you are. Stay away from my son before you kill him too." She grabbed the boy's hand and fled down the street, abandoning her basket entirely, her son stumbling to keep up. The street had gone quiet. Passers-by stared. Isabelle stood frozen on the pavement, humiliation burning through her. "Isabelle." Sebastian's voice was quiet. He took her elbow gently. "Come. Let us return to the carriage." She allowed him to guide her back, her legs moving mechanically. Inside the carriage, she sat rigidly, unable to look at him. The silence stretched as they began moving again. "I apologize that you had to endure such treatment," Sebastian said finally. "You have nothing to apologize for. It is not the first time, nor will it be the last. People can be extraordinarily cruel. They can." She paused, then said quietly, "I did not know you listened to rumors, Your Grace." "London is full of them," he replied evenly. She looked at him then, searching his face. "And yet you are here, with me, despite what people say. What people say does not change who you are. You do not know what they say about me, what they believe. I know enough. And I do not believe it." The simple confidence in his voice made her throat tight. She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak. When they arrived at Aunt Margaret's townhouse, Sebastian handed her down. "Thank you for today. I enjoyed it very much. As did I. Despite the unpleasantness," he finished. "Yes, so did I." Over the following weeks, Sebastian called frequently. Sometimes they would walk in the park, Mary trailing behind them. Other times they would visit galleries or simply sit in Aunt Margaret's drawing room, talking for hours about books and philosophy and nothing at all. Their bond deepened with each encounter. Isabelle found herself smiling more, laughing more. For the first time in years, she felt truly happy. But society noticed, and society talked. The gossip intensified. Everywhere Isabelle went, she felt the weight of judgment. The whispers followed her like a shadow, and she knew that Sebastian was being subjected to the same scrutiny. One afternoon, Isabelle attended a small gathering at Lady Pembroke's townhouse. She had not wanted to go, but Aunt Margaret had insisted it would be rude to decline. She stood near the refreshment table, sipping tea and trying to appear comfortable, when she heard familiar voices from just around the corner. Miss Penelope Hartwick, Miss Clarissa Morton, and several other young ladies were conversing, their voices carrying clearly. "I cannot believe the Duke continues to call on her," Miss Hartwick said. "Has he no sense of self-preservation?" "Perhaps he does not know about the curse," Miss Morton suggested. "Everyone knows about the curse. 3 dead fiancés? The man would have to be blind and deaf not to have heard. Maybe he thinks he is different, that he can somehow escape what befell the others. Or perhaps," a third voice added with cruel amusement, "he is simply amusing himself. She is nearly 30, practically a spinster, desperate. He probably finds her pathetic attempts to secure him entertaining." The women laughed, and Isabelle felt her cheeks burn. "His mother will intervene soon," Miss Hartwick said confidently. The Dowager Duchess would never permit her son to throw himself away on a cursed woman, especially one so old and damaged. She has nothing to offer him. No fortune, no connections, no beauty to speak of. Just a tainted reputation and bad luck. 3 dead men. How is that anything but murder? She probably poisoned them. Or hexed them. I heard she practices dark arts. More laughter. Isabelle's hands trembled, tea sloshing in her cup. The Duke will tire of her eventually. Men like him always do. And when he does, she will be left even more alone than before. It is what she deserves. Isabelle set down her cup with shaking hands and fled. She found Aunt Margaret and pleaded a headache, and they departed immediately. In the carriage, Isabelle sat in silence, the cruel words echoing in her mind. Desperate, damaged, cursed, murder. "What happened, dear?" Aunt Margaret asked gently. "Nothing. Everything. I cannot do this anymore." But even as she said it, she knew it was not true. The problem was not that she could not do it. The problem was that she was beginning to hope, and hope was dangerous. That evening, Sebastian sat in his study at Thornfield House, reviewing correspondence, when his mother entered without knocking. "We need to speak about Miss Ashford." Sebastian set down his pen. "Mother?" The Dowager Duchess closed the door and moved to stand before his desk. Her face was drawn with worry, her hands clasped tightly before her. "You have been calling on her. Frequently. People are talking. People are always talking." "Sebastian, please, listen to me." She took a breath. 3 men have died after becoming engaged to that woman. 3. I cannot stand by and watch you become the 4th. There is no curse, Mother. Those deaths were tragic coincidences. How can you be so certain? How can you risk your life on such a belief? Because I know Isabelle. She is not cursed. She is simply a woman who has endured terrible misfortune and cruel judgment. The Dowager's face crumpled slightly. "I am your mother. I carried you, raised you. I cannot lose you. Please, I am begging you, see reason. I am being reasonable. I am choosing to see the truth rather than superstition and gossip." And what is the truth? That 3 men proposed to her and died within weeks? That is not superstition, Sebastian. That is fact. Lord Pemberton had a weak heart. Mr. Langley drowned while drunk. Viscount Harrington was thrown from a temperamental horse. None of those deaths had anything to do with Isabelle. You cannot know that for certain. Sebastian stood, his patience thinning. I know that I will not abandon her because of fear and rumor. I know that my intentions toward her are serious, and I know that nothing you say will change my mind. The dowager stared at her son, seeing the resolve in his eyes, and felt cold fear settle in her chest. You mean to marry her? I have not proposed, but if I did, it would be my choice, mine alone. Sebastian, mother, I love her. I have loved her since we were children. I left 9 years ago because I could not bear to watch her marry another man. I am not leaving again. I am not abandoning her. And I will not let anyone, including you, dictate whom I care for. The dowager's hands trembled. She had lost this battle before it began. Then I have no choice. What do you mean? But she had already turned toward the door. If you will not listen to reason, perhaps she will. Mother, what are you planning? To save my son's life, even if he hates me for it. She left before Sebastian could stop her. 2 days later, the Dowager Duchess arrived at Aunt Margaret's townhouse. Isabelle was informed that the Duchess requested a private audience. With growing dread, Isabelle received her in the drawing room. Aunt Margaret withdrew, and the two women faced each other. Miss Ashford, thank you for seeing me. Your Grace. To what do I owe this visit? The Dowager did not sit. She stood, her expression a mixture of determination and fear. I will be direct. I have come to ask you to end your association with my son. Isabelle's stomach dropped. I beg your pardon? I know you were friends as children. I know my son cares for you. But I am his mother, and I cannot stand by and watch him become the fourth man to die because of you. Your Grace, please, let me finish. The Dowager's voice cracked slightly. 3 men have died, Miss Ashford. 3 men who proposed to you. I do not know if it is a curse or simply terrible luck, but I cannot risk my son's life. I cannot lose him. Isabelle felt as though the floor was tilting beneath her. I would never hurt Sebastian. Perhaps not intentionally. But the pattern is there. The deaths are real. The Dowager took a step closer, her eyes pleading. If you care for him at all, if you ever cared for him, please let him go. I am begging you. I cannot lose my son. The raw emotion in the Dowager's voice shook Isabelle to her core. This was not a cruel woman. This was a terrified mother. What if you are right? Isabelle whispered. What if I truly am cursed? What if Sebastian? Then you already know what you must do. After the Dowager left, Isabelle sat alone in the drawing room, her mind racing. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly question, what if the curse was real? 3 men dead. 3 proposals. 3 tragedies. What if loving Sebastian meant killing him? Over the next few days, Isabelle avoided Sebastian. She and he had plans to attend the theatre, but she sent a note cancelling. I regret I am unwell and must cancel our plans. When Sebastian came to call, she refused to see him. The butler turned him away with polite excuses. He came again the next day. Again, she refused him. On the 3rd day, he sent a note. Isabelle's hands trembled as she unfolded it. Isabelle, meet me at our tree, the usual spot. 8 o'clock tonight. I will be there, whether you come or not. Sebastian. She stared at the note, her heart pounding. Their tree. The old oak on the edge of the Thornfield estate, where they had spent countless afternoons as children. Evening came with storm clouds gathering over London, dark and ominous. Isabelle stood at her bedroom window, Sebastian's note clutched in her hand, watching the first drops of rain begin to fall. She would not go. She had made her decision. It was better this way, better to end things now than to watch Sebastian become the 4th man to die because of her. A knock at her door made her turn. Aunt Margaret entered, her expression gentle but knowing. You are not going. It was a statement, not a question. Isabelle shook her head. It is for the best. I will not risk his life. My darling girl, Do you truly believe staying away will protect him? Or will it simply break both your hearts for nothing? Better a broken heart than a dead man. Aunt Margaret moved to stand beside her at the window. The rain was falling harder now, drops streaking down the glass like tears. He will wait for you all night in this storm. Then he is a fool. He is a man in love. And you know as well as I do that he is stubborn enough to stand in the rain until dawn if he must. Her aunt's voice was soft. Is that what you want? For him to catch his death from cold and wet while waiting for you? Isabel's hands clenched around the note. That is not fair. No, but it is true. They stood in silence, watching the storm intensify. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Lightning flashed, illuminating the darkened street below. If I go, Isabelle whispered, it is only to send him home, to end this properly. Nothing more. Aunt Margaret squeezed her shoulder. Then go, dear, before the storm worsens. Isabelle wrapped herself in a dark cloak and slipped out into the night. The rain soaked through almost immediately, cold and relentless. She walked quickly through the empty streets, her destination clear in her mind, the old oak tree on the edge of the Thornfield estate, where she and Sebastian had spent countless childhood afternoons. When she arrived, she saw him immediately. He stood beneath the ancient oak, completely drenched, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his coat soaked through. He looked up as she approached, and even through the rain, she could see the relief in his eyes. You came, he said. You left me no choice. You will catch your death standing in this storm. Then let us talk quickly, so we may both seek shelter. Isabelle shook her head. There is nothing to discuss, Sebastian. This must end. We cannot continue. Why? He took a step toward her. Tell me why. You know why. Your mother came to see me. She begged me to let you go. And she is right. I am cursed, Sebastian. 3 men have died because of me. I will not let you be the 4th. There is no curse. How can you be so certain? Her voice broke. How can you risk your life on a belief when I have watched 3 men die? Because I know you. He moved closer, rain streaming down his face. And I refuse to let fear and superstition dictate my life. This is not about fear or superstition. This is about keeping you alive. She was shouting now, her voice barely audible over the storm. I heard what they said at Lady Pembroke's gathering. Miss Hartwick, Miss Morton, all of them. They called me desperate, damaged. They said I was cursed, that I would kill you just as I killed the others. You did not kill anyone. But what if I did? What if there is something wrong with me, something evil, and everyone who gets close to me dies? Your mother fears for your life, and so do I. I cannot watch you die because of me. I cannot. Sebastian seized her arms gently, forcing her to look at him. Do you want to know why I left 9 years ago? Why I disappeared without a word when you became engaged to Lord Pemberton? That does not matter now. It matters to me. His voice was fierce. I left because I could not bear it. I could not stand at your wedding and smile while my heart was being torn from my chest. I could not watch you marry another man when all I wanted was to be that man. I have loved you since we were children, Isabelle. I left because I loved you too much to stay. Isabelle stared at him, rain and tears mingling on her cheeks. You loved me? I love you. Present tense. I never stopped. Not in 9 years. Not for a single day. But the curse. There is no curse. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the urgency in his voice. Lord Pemberton had a weak heart. The doctors said he could have died at any moment. Mr. Langley was drunk when he fell into the Thames, a tragic accident. But not your fault. Viscount Harrington's horse was known to be temperamental. It threw him. That was not caused by you. You cannot know that for certain. I know you. I know you are kind and good and brave. You are not cursed. You are simply a woman who has endured terrible tragedies and been blamed for things beyond your control. I am so afraid, Isabelle whispered, so desperately afraid of losing you. Then let me catch you. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. His thumbs brushed away her tears, though the rain made the gesture almost futile. I am not afraid of curses or gossip or death. I am only afraid of losing you again, of letting you walk away because you think you are protecting me. I have been so lonely, Sebastian, so terribly lonely. The stigma of being called cursed. It has made me feel like I am something evil, something unworthy of love. You are worthy. You are everything good in this world. I am falling for you, she admitted, her voice breaking. I think I have been falling for you since we were children. I just did not understand what it was then. Then say it, he urged. Please, Isabelle, say it. I love you, Sebastian. I have always loved you. Say it again. I love you. He kissed her then. In the pouring rain, 9 years of longing compressed into one desperate, passionate moment. His hands were in her wet hair, her fingers clutching his soaked coat, and neither of them cared about the storm or propriety or anything except this moment, this truth finally spoken. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sebastian kept his forehead pressed against hers. Marry me, Isabelle. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that love is stronger than fear. Yes, the word came without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. He kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, relief and hope and promise. The next morning, Sebastian went directly to his mother. She was taking breakfast when he entered, still wearing the same clothes from the night before, now dry but rumpled. Sebastian! His mother rose in alarm. Where have you been? You look... I have proposed to Isabelle Ashford. She has accepted. We will be married. Silence fell over the breakfast room. The dowager's face went pale. No, Sebastian, no. You cannot... I can, and I have. He looked at Mother steadily. I will marry her with or without your blessing, but I would prefer to have it. You cannot be serious, the woman is cursed. 3 dead fiancés. There is no curse. Those deaths were tragedies, nothing more. And Isabelle has suffered enough from society's judgment. I will not add to it. His mother moved toward him, her hands outstretched. I am your mother. I carried you, raised you. I cannot lose you. Please, reconsider. I will not reconsider. I love her. I have loved her my entire life, and I will marry her. His voice softened slightly. I know you are afraid, but your fear does not change the truth. Isabelle is not cursed, and I will not abandon her. And if I refuse to give my blessing? Sebastian's expression hardened. Then you will lose me. That is your choice to make. But understand this. I will marry Isabelle Ashford with or without your approval. The only question is whether you wish to be part of our lives going forward. His mother stared at him, seeing the resolve in his eyes, the absolute certainty. The dowager sank back into her chair, her face in her hands. You truly mean to do this, she whispered. I do. When Isabelle visited her parents in Hertfordshire to inform them of her engagement, she expected resistance, perhaps even hostility. Instead, her mother's face lit up with something like relief. The Duke of Thornfield wishes to marry you? How wonderful! Her father nodded approvingly. An excellent match. Well done, Isabelle. Isabelle stared at them, stunned by their easy acceptance. You are not concerned about the curse, about what people will say? My dear, her mother said, you are marrying a duke. Let people say what they wish. You will finally be off our hands and well settled. The cold practicality of it stung, but Isabelle was not surprised. Her parents had never shown her genuine affection. They were simply pleased to be rid of their disappointing daughter. Her brother Thomas was grudgingly satisfied. A duke in the family will elevate our standing despite the gossip. I suppose it could be worse. Only Aunt Margaret's reaction came from true love and joy. When Isabelle told her the news, her aunt wept with happiness. "I knew it," she said, embracing Isabelle tightly. "I knew he loved you. I knew you loved him. Oh, my darling girl, I am so very happy for you." Over the following weeks, Sebastian and Isabelle courted openly, making their intentions clear. Society erupted with gossip. Everywhere they went, whispers followed. But Sebastian remained steadfast, calling on her daily, escorting her to various functions, making it abundantly clear that Isabelle Ashford would be his duchess. His mother made several more attempts to dissuade him. She pleaded, then threatened to withhold her blessing, but Sebastian remained unmoved. Seeing the absolute certainty in his eyes, she felt her resistance crumble. She feared losing him to death, yes, but she feared losing him to estrangement even more. 3 weeks after the proposal, Sebastian and Isabelle attended a grand ball at the Worthington estate. They entered together, and the whispers began immediately. But they had grown accustomed to the stares, the gossip. They were standing near the refreshment table when it happened. Miss Penelope Hartwick, emboldened by champagne and the company of her friends, spoke in a voice just loud enough to carry. "I cannot believe he is truly going through with it, marrying the curse." The ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned toward Miss Hartwick, then toward Sebastian and Isabelle. The moment stretched, tense and expectant. Sebastian set down his glass with deliberate care and turned to face the assembled crowd. When he spoke, his voice carried across the silent ballroom with absolute authority. "I will say this once, and only once. The woman beside me is Miss Isabelle Ashford, and she will soon be my wife, the Duchess of Thornfield. She is not cursed. She has endured tragedies through no fault of her own, and she has survived judgment that would have broken lesser people. If anyone in this room, anyone at all, refers to her with such disrespect again, they will answer to me personally, and I assure you, you do not wish to make an enemy of the Duke of Thornfield." The silence was absolute. Miss Hartwick had gone pale, her eyes wide with fear. Around the room, people shifted uncomfortably. "Furthermore," Sebastian continued, his hand moving to rest at the small of Isabelle's back, "I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate that this remarkable woman has agreed to be my wife. Any who think otherwise are welcome to absent themselves from our presence permanently." He turned back to Isabelle, his expression softening. "Shall we dance?" She nodded, too moved to speak. He led her onto the dance floor, and gradually, tentatively, the music resumed. Conversation started again, but the tone had shifted. No one dared speak against Isabelle Ashford in Sebastian Thornfield's presence again. The Dowager Duchess approached Isabelle privately a week later. It was with a very different demeanor than her first visit. "Miss Ashford, Isabelle, I owe you an apology. I was frightened for my son, and I allowed that fear to make me cruel. But I see now that he is happier than I have ever seen him. And I see that you love him truly. That is all a mother can ask for her child." Isabelle took the Dowager's hands. "I will never hurt him. I swear it." "I believe you. And I hope you can forgive me for doubting you." "There is nothing to forgive." The Dowager embraced her, and in that moment, Isabelle felt something she had not felt in years: acceptance. The wedding took place on a beautiful autumn day, with golden leaves falling like blessings. The ceremony was held in the Thornfield Chapel, intimate but elegant, attended by both families and select friends. Isabelle wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but exquisite. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, she saw Sebastian waiting for her, his eyes shining with love and certainty. When Isabelle and Sebastian spoke their vows, their voices were steady and sure. "I, Isabelle, take you, Sebastian, to be my husband, in joy and sorrow, in plenty and want, in sickness and health, until death parts us. I, Sebastian, take you, Isabelle, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand beside you against all who would harm you, for as long as we both shall live." When they kissed, sealing their union, The chapel erupted in applause. Isabelle felt tears on her cheeks, tears of joy, of relief, of hope finally fulfilled. Isabelle, for her first time in years, felt worthy of love. She had found a family that truly accepted her, Sebastian, Aunt Margaret, and eventually even the Dowager. Her parents remained distant, but it no longer hurt as it once had. She had found where she belonged. One evening, a year after their wedding, Isabelle and Sebastian stood together on the terrace of Thornfield Manor, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabelle asked quietly. "Marrying me despite everything?" Sebastian pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. "Not for a single moment. You are the best decision I ever made. I love you, and I love you. Always." The curse had never been real. It had been tragedy, coincidence, and a society all too eager to blame a young woman for circumstances beyond her control. But love, true love, steadfast and unwavering, had proven stronger than fear, stronger than gossip, stronger than superstition. Isabelle and Sebastian had found each other again after 9 years of silence, and this time nothing would tear them apart. Do you believe in curses, or do you believe in the power of love? Have you ever been judged unfairly by society? How did you overcome it? Let us know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of love conquering fear and superstition, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more historical romance tales that will capture your heart. Thank you for watching, and until next time, may love always find a way.